What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college basketball Week 16 top 25. As always, I have my guy Ty joining me for our rankings. But before we get into it, we have to talk about who's dropped from the rankings. And this week, it's just FAU after they only had one game and lost. And, not being in a conference that you can get some good quality wins in, it's a bad loss for them. But they should be making the tournament, to say the least. And then in the others receiving votes here, Ty, which one of these teams possibly could jump into the rankings next week or even make a surprise run in March?
I would say definitely NC State. I know they've been a little inconsistent, but they just ran away with it against North Carolina yesterday. Just kind of blew them out the last 5 or 6 minutes of that game. And they're still a really talented team, so I would look out for them because it seems like they're starting to heat up a little bit.
Yeah, for me, I got to go with Oral Roberts. Yes, you know that team also well that made it to a Sweet 16 a few years ago, and this team has reloaded, and I think is even better than that team before. You have a lot of the returning guys; they're all seniors now on that team, and they look primed for a possible, 12-5 seed upset, 11-6 upset, and could make a run. But then, you see those other three teams in Maryland, Pitt, and Kentucky. They're kind of teams right now that are around the borderline of, 8, 9 seeds and could possibly play their way out or into the tournament, just depending on the last few weeks. But we'll jump into 25 and making their second appearance in our rankings this year, besides, the 1 week they joined in week 2, they are back in the rankings after a 14-week hiatus. They're on a 5-game winning streak. They're only a game back from Alabama for the SEC 1 seed with 2 weeks to go. And they have a tough task ahead of them this week as they get Tennessee at home tomorrow night. So if they want to possibly become the number 1 seed in the SEC, they got to win that game.
And at 24, we have TCU. Mike Miles Jr. has been out, so I think their ranking does not really reflect how good this team is. But we'll find out tonight. Kansas comes in. Kansas has really got their feet under them again, now up to number 4 in our rankings. So I think that'll be a big test for TCU. They're now fully healthy, so we'll see if they can get back to where they were in early January or so when they were almost a top 10 team. So I think if they can hit their stride again, they're going to be really dangerous because they're probably going to be like a 4 seed at best just because they already have 9 losses. But I don't think anyone's going to want to see them in their bracket.
23, you have another Big 12 team in the Iowa State Cyclones. And this team is also kind of like TCU, struggled recently, but this team has no excuse. They're 2-5 in their last 7. They're just hitting a tough patch in the schedule. And how do they get rewarded again this week with another tough game on the road at Texas? And this team could play their way out of the rankings next week if they lose one of these games. But they have really been a good story early on in the year, and are they going to keep that story alive heading into March?
And at 22, we have San Diego State, a very ugly win over Fresno State, two teams in the 40s. But that's how they like to play. They like to play defensive games, low scoring, and that's why they've been so consistent the last few years because that's where they hang their hat on defense, and that's no exception this year. Another dominant year in the Mountain West, 12-2, and another 20-win season. It seems like every year they're going to win at least 20 games. One of the more underrated programs in college basketball. And it looks like they should cruise to about a 5 or 6 seed, depending on how that Mountain West tournament goes. But I think they could be dangerous. Matt Bradley's a really underrated player. It's just can they score enough when they need buckets in March? We'll find out though.
21, the Kansas State Wildcats are falling quite a bit here after they had a tough week last week, and they're also 3-5 in their last 8 games. So it's not what you want to see out of a team that's almost played themselves already into the tournament. Just got to probably win a game or two more, and I would say this team is definitely making the tournament. But the hardest part of their schedule is now over. They face Baylor, and then after that, it's 3 easier games compared to what we've seen in the Big 12. But you never know again with the Big 12. And obviously, their biggest storyline this year was Keontae Johnson. After all he's been through, he's having a spectacular season and leading the Wildcats to a March Madness berth.
We got UConn dropping once again this week. Now they come in at number 20. This team has just been so inconsistent since they started. I think it was 14-0 and then 6-7 since then. So this was every bit of a top five team. They were ranked in the top five. They've been number one at one point. But since then, there's just no consistency with them. They show flashes of being a really dominant team, but you got to put a couple good games together in March if you're going to make a run. And if it started right now, I would not see them getting to the second weekend. But, obviously there's almost a month left. So still time to turn it around and find their stride again. But it's been a struggle for them lately.
19, talking about a struggle. This is not that team in the Big East. It's the Creighton Blue Jays, finally healthy, a team that looks reloaded and looking to bust some brackets this year because this team will not be higher than a 4 seed, I think, right now. At least if we're going right now, they're around that 6-ish range, and I think they can possibly make a run. They're 9-1 in their last 10, lost in double overtime on the road to Providence in a great game. And Kalkbrenner and Alexander have been really carrying this team on their backs this year. But they go in to Marquette, who's leading the conference right now. So whoever wins that game, more than likely, will be ahead of the Big East heading into the last week of the season. So Creighton, if they want to be the 1 seed, get a few extra advantages in the Big East tournament, they got to win that game.
And at 18, we have Xavier keeping the Big East trend going. This team has, Fremantle out for the year, so that's a big loss for them. Otherwise, they could be potentially a top 10 team. They could even be running away with the Big East right now. But unfortunately, they have to deal with that injury, and they've dealt with it pretty well so far. A tough loss to Marquette this week on the road, but they're still keeping stride. They're still 1 game out of first in the Big East, so still a chance to win the conference. And they should be, in the 4 to 6 seed range, like a lot of these teams we've seen so far. But, it's hard to see them making too much of a run in March, just, being shorthanded like they are. But either way, if they can get to the Sweet 16 and continue on this pace, it'll be a solid season for them.
17, we got another Big East team in the Providence Friars. And this team last year was my team that, still was flying under the radar. And it seems like they're taking that same role this year. All 4 of their conference losses this year have came on the road. So that means they can defend their home court. And they're only a game back of Marquette. They're also tied with Xavier and Creighton for that Big East 1 seed. So if they want to get that, they got to go on the road to UConn and get a very tough win in their building. And then Georgetown, well, we already know about Georgetown, so that should be an easy one. But Bryce Hopkins and Devin Carter have looked great for this Friars team. And, this might be another team that if you're looking for an under the radar pick to make a Sweet 16, I think the Providence Friars might be on the top of that list.
And at 16, we have Indiana, another team who's been kind of inconsistent as of late, but they're still trying to get healthy. Xavier Johnson, their point guard, has been out for a long time. They're hoping to get him back before the Big Ten tournament, especially before the NCAA tournament. Race Thompson's missed a couple games. A tough no call at the end of that Northwestern game, if anyone saw that. Could have been a push off there. And it was in a tie game late in the game. So you could say Indiana might have got the raw end of the stick in that game. And they do get a bounce back win over Illinois, though. And I think if this team didn't have such a slow start to the new year in January and late December, I think they'd be looked at a lot differently. They'd potentially be a top 10 team. So I think they will be dangerous if they can get healthy for March, but that's a big if right now.
15, another team in the Big Ten are the Northwestern Wildcats. And yes, you are reading that right. 15 in our rankings, a little higher than the AP poll, but we, got to give them credit where credit is due. They've beaten Purdue and Indiana in the last 8 days. How many teams have beat Purdue? Not that many. And, Indiana, they're also not losing games anymore like they were. So this Northwestern team is legit, and they're also breaking lots of streaks now that this team is finally good. So if you really want to look at a team that could be a surprise tournament winner, I think you got to look at Texas A&M and Northwestern because these teams are at the top of their conference, but just not getting enough respect.
We got Miami coming in at 14. This seems like another team that's getting no respect this year. They have been very consistent, only 5 losses to this point. And, people forget that this was an Elite 8 team last year. I know they were a 10 seed, but they really hit their stride in the NCAA tournament. And they've carried that momentum into this season. Isaiah Wong returning. He's been a very good guard for this team. And guards typically are what gets it done in March. So I think this team has the potential to be a second weekend team, maybe back to the Elite Eight again this year. But they've been very consistent, and teams that are consistent like that tend to make it through that first round and not get upset. So I think this team is going to be set up pretty well if they can stay healthy. And they're still right in the thick of things in the ACC. So a lot to play for still for them.
13, you got the Gonzaga Bulldogs moving up one. An interesting stat I saw was they beat Pepperdine last week for the 45th straight time, which is, just an unheard of record. And sometimes they'll break that streak. But this team is a game back from St. Mary's in their conference. And it just so happens that these teams play Saturday night for all the marbles and the seeding going into the tournament. But their biggest question mark is hanging with the big dogs. And, this team played Bama, Kentucky, Michigan State, a lot of good teams early in the season. And, you and I really didn't know what to expect of this team because they won some and then they also lost some. But it seems like they were in the game for most of it. So I think Gonzaga will be the most battle tested heading into a tournament than they have been in previous years. But what does that say about a team that normally doesn't lose games in conference? And, it's obviously on the record that they've lost two, which is a lot more than we've seen in the last few years. So it is cause for some concern. Loyola Marymount also beat St. Mary's too. So maybe they just, had great game plans against them. But Gonzaga, as usual, a top 15 team heading into the tournament looking like a 2 or 3 seed.
And at 12, just ahead of Gonzaga, is St. Mary's, who you mentioned is in first in the West Coast Conference and has a huge opportunity this Saturday, I believe it is, if they can win at Gonzaga, which is very difficult to do. But if they can do it, then they should win the conference outright, which I don't know the stat, but I want to say it's been at least 5 years, if not maybe 10 years since they've done that. So that'd be a huge feat for St. Mary's. And they are a really good team. Obviously, they did get upset by Loyola Marymount. That's their one loss in the conference. So, that's a pretty bad loss to have on your resume. But outside of that, they've been a really solid, underrated team, and they could make a deep run in March. But I look at them as a team that could also lose in the first round. So it'll be interesting to see what they draw.
And just missing out on the top 10 for the second straight week are the Baylor Bears. And this team had to get some sort of demotion after they lost to Kansas after blowing a double-digit halftime lead. And it just so happens they lost by double digits as well. So this team it just all hit the fan, if you want to look at it that way in the second half there for Baylor. And how do you get rewarded? You get 3 ranked teams left on your schedule before your tournament. And it just so happens one's on the road at Kansas State, which has been very tough to play. And you get Texas coming into town, who really is looking for that win and push them back up in the Big 12 standing. So Baylor has a make it or break it week for them. 0-2, their team might be looking at almost out of the top 25, and they go 2-0. Well, then they might be looking at the top 5 ranking next week. So a lot is riding on the line here for Baylor.
And into the top 10 is Marquette this week. Another team that I think has really not gotten talked about a lot, but people seem to have forgot from his days at Texas. I know they didn't end super well, but Shaka Smart can coach a basketball team. Obviously, he had some crazy runs with VCU back in the day. I know Texas typically fizzled out in March, but he coached some very good teams, and it's showing now in only his second year at Marquette. Already a 20-win season, 12-3 in the Big East, and they have a shot to win the conference. It's in their court right now, with a half-game lead on the rest of the conference. So if they can just go 4-1 the rest of the way, they'll at least get a share of the conference championship. And then I think they could definitely make a run in March. It's another team I could see going out early or potentially making a run to even the Final Four. So it'll just depend on the teams that they draw in March.
At 9, Tennessee is staying put after, taking down the number 1 team last week, but then they lose on the road to Kentucky. This team was looking at a top 5 ranking if they win that game, but it just didn't happen for them. And I think a lot of people are starting to write them off, at least from what I've seen on social media and whatnot, just because of their recent struggles. They're 2-4 in their last 6, really kind of hit the road. But then you got to look at 2 of those losses were at the buzzer by 1 point, and it could easily be 4-2. So I think you gotta just take a step back and look at that. Everyone's overreacting just a little bit. And once these teams, like in the SEC, Big 12, I would say, those two conferences, and even Big 10 at this point, if they go play a mid-major team in the first round, I think they're going to be more relieved just because they don't have to get beat up and how much it means for them every single night. And yes, I know that the season's on the line in March, but I think they have a breath of fresh air when they get to see teams like that.
And we have Texas falling 2 spots here to number 8. I know they lost that game to Texas Tech this week, but I've still been very impressed. They've dealt with a lot of adversity this year, losing Chris Beard. I, keep thinking this team is going to falter, eventually go on a 3 or 4 game losing streak, and they just haven't. This week they struggled a little bit, but they're still 21-6, still 10-4 in the Big 12, and they're tied for first in that conference. And if they could even get a share of the Big 12 title, I think that would be a huge win for this team, given everything that's happened this season. And I think they are still going to be really dangerous in March. They just keep beating really good teams in the conference. And I have not been high on them at all just because of the Chris Beard thing, thinking that things would start going the wrong way, and they just haven't. So props to Texas. And, I think they could still make a run in March, even after everything that's happened.
At 7, Virginia's moving up one spot. This team, well, I mean, I don't know how I moved them up and we moved them up or whatnot, but they beat Louisville and Notre Dame by a total of 5 points. And, a win is a win at this point in the season. They're 21-4. So it may not be pretty, but they're getting the wins. And, a lot of those teams are falling at the buzzer, but they still have the lead on Miami for first place in the ACC, more than likely going to beat Boston College. And the UNC game is a very intriguing game for both of those teams. Good resume win for Virginia, or what it will do for the resume. And UNC obviously needs to win that game to get into the tournament at this point. So Virginia has a lot on the line with these last 2 weeks in the season.
And number 6, we have Arizona, just a team who's had a couple really bad losses, and outside of that, they've looked like every bit of a top 5 team, maybe even the best team in college basketball. But those losses are on their resume. That double-digit loss to a really bad Washington State team, a blowout loss to Stanford. So if you take those away, they'd probably be maybe even number 2, maybe even number 1, but you can't do that. Those losses are there. Just like last year, it's a team who has the capability to win the whole thing in March, but could also lose in the first weekend just because of a couple of their inconsistencies. They do have a top probably 5 player in college basketball in Azuolas Tubelis, 19 points per game this year, and a really good center in Umar Ballo. So this team can compete with anyone. It's just a matter of whether, they can put together 6 good performances in a row.
At 5, Purdue is falling yet again after their loss to Maryland. But they did respond very well in a blowout win over Ohio State, which a lot of teams have done, it feels like this year. They still have the game and a half lead over Northwestern with 3 games left on their schedule. But they do have Indiana coming to town this weekend. We know they lost to Indiana on the road. So this game means a lot, not just for conference play, but for the rivalry and for dignity this year. And I expect Purdue to come out firing. Zach Edey and Trace Jackson Davis will be another great matchup to watch. So if you're a college basketball fan, make sure you're tuned in on Fox at 7:30 to watch this game. And so if Fox is watching, they should give me some free promotion or whatnot trying to promote this game.
All right, number 4, we have Kansas, and this team I was really down on about 2 weeks ago. I think they lost 4 out of 5, something like that. But now they've really got their footing back. Dead in the water against Baylor there in the first half, and just came out and dominated the second half for a really impressive win. And coming in at 22-5 now, they still have a chance to win the Big 12, which they seemingly do every single year under Bill Self. But this week they're going to have a tough test tonight, actually. Games going on right now at TCU, a team who just got fully healthy. And remember, they dominated Kansas in their house a couple months or a couple weeks ago. So definitely going to be some motivation there for Kansas. If they can get through that game, I would expect them to beat West Virginia, and they would be in the driver's seat once again in the Big 12. And I think the number 1 overall seed is still within reach for this team. And I think they have a very good chance to repeat, but there's about 12 other teams that have a good chance to win it all this year. So who knows?
At 3, a team that is not getting enough credit throughout this whole year, more than likely just because they're in the Pac-12, and it looks like Arizona and UCLA are the only 2 teams that might make it into the tournament, are the UCLA Bruins. And this team, they're on a 6-game winning streak. They're beating the brakes off the team. They lead the Pac-12 over Arizona. Jaime Jaquez and Jalen Carter putting up great numbers yet again. And where's the media love for this UCLA team? They're getting disrespected. We have them at 3. They're still not even in the top 3 in the AP poll. They're putting teams ahead of them, and that's the highest ranking that we've put them at this year. But you can see up there, they have not left the top 25 this year, and I think this might be the year where they're gonna fly under the radar yet again, as possibly even a 1 or 2 seed, and go all this way, and everyone's gonna be, oh yeah, I didn't even notice UCLA was this good this year, and somehow wind up in a Final Four. I think the sky's the limit for this team.
And dropping one spot to number 2 is Alabama. Not a loss anyone should hang their head about. They lost on the road against a top 10 team in a tough place to play in Tennessee, and they bounced back with a win over the weekend. So still in first place in the SEC at 13-1, and still in very prime position for a 1 seed, especially if they can go 2-0 this week, which I expect them to do. And I think they're still going to be a really dangerous team. I think they still might be the best team in the country, even with that loss and having 4 losses on their resume, just because nobody is great this year. It's pretty wide open this year, and Alabama has as much of a say as anyone else to win the national championship this year. So I would not be surprised if they end up cutting down the nets, but like a lot of other teams, I would not be surprised as well if they get knocked out early, because that's how it is this year.
And at 1, claiming the top spot yet again for the 3rd time this year, are the Houston Cougars. And just like the UCLA Bruins, they're not getting enough love. Everyone's talking about Edey and Purdue and Kansas and Jalen Wilson and Alabama. Oh, they're in a tough conference. And, all the top 10 teams in the Big 12, SEC are getting more love than Houston because, well, who does Houston play? Memphis, and what'd they do? Destroyed them. They beat them by 8, I believe, but it wasn't really a game. And they're riding a 7-game winning streak, 16-1 in their last 17 games. And if they can beat Tulane, who's in 2nd place in the conference, they get the 1 seed in the American tournament. And for me, I don't see how this team isn't a 1 seed going into March Madness. Even if they lose 2 games, I think there's no way they're not. So you got to look at who's getting it done, and it's Marcus Sasser. We saw what he did last year, and then he got hurt, and how different this Houston team was. And, it seems like every year there's always an injury to a top team that, confuses them, and they struggle in March. And hopefully it doesn't happen to Houston again, so we can see what this team's full potential can be heading into March. But that's going to be it for our video this week. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below to be entered into our giveaway at 500 subscribers. All you have to do to be entered, just be subscribed to our channel, and come back later this week to see our updated bracketology for the weeks. March is almost here, so make sure you guys are up to date on your bracket knowledge. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.